All right. Did you want to, once they turn the recorder on, you go ahead and make some comments, then I will, and I will turn it over then to Ron.
Okay. So today is a work session with the County Council at 10 o'clock on February 24th. This work session was requested by Identity Clark County, requesting a time for the council to have an education of the industry of aggregate industry in the community. The council did approve this work session probably about a month and a half ago. I just want to be clear that this has nothing to do with any specific quarry aggregate operations today in the county. This is an overview of aggregate in general. So with that said, I'll hand it over to the chair.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good comments. That's exactly was the purpose of this meeting. And I would just like to also thank Identity Clark County and all of the individuals that are participating in this work session today. It really was an educational, this is an educational opportunity for the council to learn as much as we can about the aggregate industry. These folks are actually part of our constituency too. So I want to thank you for being involved. I want to thank you for providing jobs in this community, and thank you for the information that we are about to receive. So Ron, you take it away, please.
Very good. Good morning, Chair Acquiring O'Brien, Council, and County Manager Otto. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with Council in this workshop environment. I'm Ron Arp. I am the president of the nonprofit business leaders group Identity Clark County. We appreciate the chair being willing to open this conversation today. It's centered on our county's impending aggregate supply crisis. Multiple groups at a broad range of businesses and individuals have united to sound this alarm and to request the council form a renewed commitment to collaborating with industry to provide sufficient rock, both crushed rock and round rock, across the county for maintenance, development, and construction in keeping with the Growth Management Act. We've arranged for a number of people to speak today across the local industry to provide comment in the spirit of education and understanding the challenge. You will find these people care very deeply about our community. They believe in keeping housing costs low, maintaining good roads, stretching tax dollars, generating local jobs, reducing truck miles traveled, reducing carbon footprints, and operating as good neighbors. They have an outstanding track record of reclaiming quarries for homes, subdivisions, green spaces, and employment land once their useful life is completed as a quarry. Today, you'll probably hear some frustration, but you'll also hear some good ideas for both the short and long term and a desire to collaborate. This is a tough and heavily regulated business. It requires long-term commitments, which in turn require credit certainty and reliability for permitting and for operations. Like it or not, the county and industry must cooperate as partners to address this challenge on behalf of the entire county. Madam Chair, if it meets with your acceptance, I'd like to go ahead and have each person introduce themselves when they give their remarks. And if that meets with your acceptance, I'd like to begin with Chrissy Lyons.
That meets with my acceptance. Go ahead, Chrissy.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, council members, and thank you for your time today. I'm Chrissy Lyons, the current board president for the Southwest Washington Contractors Association. Since 1946, the SWCA has championed a thriving construction industry through advocacy, education, and partnerships. We have over 400 members in the commercial and industrial market, made up of contractors, subcontractors, suppliers, and associates. Clark County has seen tremendous growth over the years, and our members and partners have played a role in that growth. So I appreciate your comments, Chair, on our members here. So be it new roads, utilities, subdivisions, commercial developments, public amenities, or the expanding waterfront development. So really creating the opportunity for jobs and housing while maintaining a great place to work, play, and live. So as you see outlined in the aggregate planning letter, signed by approximately 290 local stakeholders and endorsed by our partners with Ron at Identity Clark County, the Northwest Utility Contractors Association, the Building Industry Association of Clark County, and the Clark County Association of Realtors. Our rock quarries and pits are being depleted rapidly and are constrained by trip counts and other arbitrary controls. So we need the ability to investigate all potential property in the surface mining overlay and to develop the availability of rock reserves and create a streamlined pathway for the mining operators to access these resources, you know, while also ensuring protection for the residents and our environment. So I understand it's a big lift, but we want to be a resource to you in creating that pathway and support the sustainable growth of our region. So we look forward to further discussions with the council and the county staff. So thank you, and I think we'll move on in our agenda, if that's okay with you, over to I think either Tracy or Ryan.
Hi there. My name is Tracy Dorio. I am with Dorio Construction. I'm a custom home builder in Clark County. And I'm also the 2021 president of the Building Industry Association of Washington. I've been fortunate enough to serve a couple of terms as president of the BIA of Clark County. I'm a 50+ year resident of Clark County. And so those are the qualifications I bring to the table. I was brought in at the last moment, so I have no prepared remarks, but what I will tell you is that Aggregate is of strategic importance to the home building industry. We simply, with the state of technology and construction methodologies, can't build without Aggregate. A quick look at our files this morning, and our projects range from utilization of 500 tons to over 1,500 tons of aggregate per job. A lot of that aggregate, of course, goes into the concrete products and then that form our driveways, our approaches, our foundations, etc. We also use a large amount of aggregate to form erosion control pads around our projects. And we're one of the leaders in the home building industry in that we create a work environment that encompasses the entire front landscape of our projects when we start, so that we don't run sediments and muds and things into the road. So we try to be really good stewards of the environment and comply with all of the county requirements. And we've been used as an example many times by Jeanette Chumley on proper job site management, and that takes aggregate. I looked at our records quickly, and our aggregate costs from pits like Stormwater and CMix have leapt from $10 to $12 a yard. I see one invoice yesterday for $19 a yard for, for a ton for aggregate. So those speak to the affordability of housing in Clark County. And quite frankly, we are under pretty much a multi-pronged assault at this point. Almost every possible financial calamity that can befall the home building industry is on the radar now. Lumber prices have tripled, and of course aggregate prices, transportation's going up. I noticed our trucking used to be $60 a yard load, and now it's $120 a load, so speaks to affordability. We did a little research, and National Association of Home Builders indicates now that for every $1,000 that's added to the price of the home, about 2,400 people are priced out of the market. Those are simply people that can no longer afford to buy our products. So it's important that we do everything we can to keep housing affordability in our area. As important as that is to the local economy, and of course to all of the residents of Clark County. So I'd like to also point out that all of the aggregates, while they may reside on some piece of private land, belong to the citizens of Clark County. and it's a strategically important mineral. We simply can't do without it. And with that, I would certainly entertain any questions of the home building industry. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think maybe what we'll do, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate opening it up for questions. I think what we'll do is have the presentation, and then at the end, if there are questions, hopefully you can stick around and be here for the entire thing in case we do have questions. So
I will do, and I appreciate
All right.
the opportunity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ryan McDonald. I'm the owner of McDonald Excavating, and we're a contractor in Clark County and the region. And I'm also the president of the Northwest Utility Contractors Association, which is very active in the region and in Portland. And I just wanted to provide some examples of the amount of aggregate it takes to build. And I put my estimating hat on and put together a small example of building 1 mile of roadway. We obviously have thousands of miles of roads in the county. And so a standard 2-lane road with a center turn lane, not even a major street, would have about 19,000 tons of aggregate base that we use to hold up the road. On most of those road projects, we upgrade the water, sewer, and storm systems. And if you have a standard 8-foot deep trench, that takes about 37,000 tons of aggregate to backfill those trenches. You got sidewalks along that street. There's about 800 tons in aggregate and sidewalks. When you consider concrete and asphalt are made up of roughly 80% aggregate, there's about 8,000 tons of aggregate that goes into the asphalt that paves the road. There's about another 2,000 tons of aggregate in the concrete curbs and the sidewalks and all the other ancillary items that go along with building a road. All in all, it takes about 75,000 tons of aggregate to build 1 mile of road, which is 40,000 yards. And that's not even taking into account the potential for fills in the roadways. It's not taking into account the aggregate that goes in the manholes that you use to put in the utility systems, or the walls that hold up big cuts in the roads, or the abutments of the bridges. So that's kind of a minimum, I would say. And then you take into account all the utilities, projects that happen, outside of road building, and 1 foot of trench. So that length of trench takes 2 tons of aggregate to backfill in a standard trench width. So you multiply that by tens and thousands of feet of utilities that are installed every year, and you come up with huge quantities. Another point I'd like to make is on the environmental side of the aggregates. And 10 years ago, when Fisher, English, Livingston, Daybreak, Mountaintop were all producing rock, as a contractor, it was always a pretty safe assumption to figure about a 1 hour round trip for a load of rock. And in our industry, the transportation of materials is one, if not the top expense we have, because moving 105,000 pounds of material down the road burns a lot of fuel and it's expensive. Each dump truck you see traveling on the road is burning about 7 gallons of fuel per hour. Subsequently, since our main source is now in one corner of the county, our round times, to get rock south of SR 500 and east of 205, it's almost a 3-hour round trip. So that's tripled for us. And that's a huge expense in the cost of the aggregate. And I'd just like to say that as our sources move further away from the work, our carbon footprint increases exponentially. The wear and tear on our roads increase exponentially, and the risk to the traveling public increases because it takes 3 times the amount of trucks to move the same amount of material in the same amount of time. And if we're serious about environmental concerns, we would have the source as close as possible to the activity taking place. The last point I'd like to make is kind of along what Tracy was saying, is cost. And we've all heard the statement, supply and demand, and it's real. As supply dwindles and demand increases, prices go up. When you couple the supply shortage with less locations of supply, with further distances and trip count restrictions, you get prices that are not sustainable for healthy growth in the county. And it increases barriers to our children trying to buy a house or us trying to get them out of the house. It's a barrier to small businesses trying to start up. And as the cost to build roads goes up, we get less roads built, but yet we're wearing them out at an exponential pace because we're hauling heavy loads further across the county. And you could also tie it to the homeless crisis we have in the regions that's exploded in the last couple of years. When we need to be making housing more affordable, we're increasing it when we have the resources that we just need to open them up. So I would just say in conclusion, the average person doesn't understand how big of an impact this problem has to them, and they shouldn't have to, but the folks on this phone call should. Aggregates are the foundation of everything we build. It's in the major components of every yard of concrete that holds up your home. It's in every trench that carries the sewer from your home, or in every trench that carries the water to your home. It's under every road you drive on. It's in the concrete beam that holds up our bridges. It's in the sidewalks we walk on. It's literally the start of everything built. And I would assume that is why the Growth Management Act was created to begin with, because someone along the line saw how important it was to sustain our communities. And I think we should heed that advice. And I'll turn it over to whoever's next, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ryan.
This is Allison Moss. I believe I'm next based on the agenda. And let me get my notes up. I am a shareholder at Schwabe, Williamson and Wyatt in our Vancouver office. I'm a land use attorney. I've worked with the Growth Management Act since its adoption in 1990 and was asked to give a very, very brief overview of the Growth Management Act provisions relating to aggregates. As the first step under the Growth Management Act, counties were required to designate mineral resource lands and other natural resource lands. These designations were supposed to have taken place by September 1st, 1991, quite some time ago. The intent of these designations was not only to conserve the resource, but to provide notice of potential mining locations to minimize future land use conflicts. The intent was also to provide more than a 20-year supply, because unlike some other resources, that aggregates are not renewable. They're used up and you move on to another site. Following the designation of these commercially important aggregate resources, counties had to adopt development regulations conserving them and assuring that the use of lands adjacent to them did not interfere with the continued use of them for extraction of minerals, so long as the extractive operation followed best management practices. Counties have taken two basic approaches to fulfilling this obligation. Some, a very few, have invested in mapping the resources, the locations of them, but most have chosen to identify mineral resource sites on a case-by-case basis based on property owner applications to amend the comprehensive plans of the jurisdiction to allow new operations. This latter approach of incremental designation leads to increased land use conflicts as adjacent property owners are not aware of the designation prior to purchasing or developing their lands, and it can lead to the permanent loss of aggregates due to incompatible uses, conflicts, and even developing over the resources. The Department of Commerce was charged with developing guidelines for designating mineral resource lands, and it recommends that local governments identify and designate all commercially significant mineral deposits as part of their periodic reviews of their comprehensive plans. So that is a whirlwind tour through the growth management, mineral resources provisions, and I will stay on until 11 o'clock if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
All right. Thank you, Allison. My name is Eric Staley. Before I start in, I want to thank the council members for making this time and being available to hear from everyone. I am a mining and engineering geologist with Geodesign, now called NV5. I've worked for 20 years, consulted on at least 100 mines in the Northwest, and have done considerable work in Clark County as well. I wanted to give a backdrop for some of the understanding we have of the aggregate resources in Clark County. I was involved in the report that we put together, an analysis of permitted resource in the county in January of 2018. We coordinated with DNR, which is the state agency responsible for mine permitting, and identified 25 sites in the county that had an active permit. But the truth is that more than half of those sites, 13, don't even produce commercial products. They are either in stages of reclamation or backfilling and accepting soil or doing other things that don't supply aggregate resource to the county. Following that, we looked more closely at what those resources are in the active sites, the 12 that remain. And 3 of those sites really had just a kind of a de minimis amount of aggregate left. And in fact, I was looking at recent numbers of those 3 sites that were close to being done, 2 actually now are done and are in active reclamation. So of the remaining 9 sites, we identified the resources that are likely left and came up with approximately 39 million cubic yards of material, which it sounds like an awful lot when you hear 39 million of anything. But to help put that in context, we used some per capita usage based on DNR studies that had been done, as well as just kind of a polling of the industry people that we could talk to about it, and came up with a couple of per capita consumption rates. Looking at that and Clark County's population, we had about anywhere from 7 to 21 years of resource left based on our analysis. So 7 years was based on DNR's report, which used a potentially high number. So we also looked at an absolute best case, which was about a third of that, and it still only came up with about 21 years of resource. Since that study, which is 3 years ago now, basically we have been using material and not providing additional resource to the market. There haven't really been any major permitting efforts. I know there are some in process, but I think that's the essence of why we're here today, is that it's a challenge to try and permit sites to get them to a productive status for the community. Also, Clark County's population, I was looking at those numbers as well. As of 2019, the county gained about 7% population. So we're looking at, in 4 years, a 7% growth of population, not a commensurate increase in the aggregate resource. So with those numbers aside, I'll say that I'm involved in a lot of permitting projects as well as resource evaluations for mines. And my experience in Clark County has been that mining permits don't come up very often, but that's true for any county. Mining just isn't a common permitting practice or permitting consideration for a lot of counties. When they do come up, it does take a bit of coordination and often a bit of education with county staff to help them understand. I know that very often the permitting standards are geared toward other kinds of developments, such as housing or commercial or roadways or some other sort of permanent and obviously a different kind of use. So we have had some challenges in that regard with permitting to try and identify standards that might be more appropriate or more understanding of the nature of a mine site versus some of these other developments. And I guess just to make one potential example that we could discuss later is the example of stormwater permitting. There are state agencies involved in permitting stormwater on mine sites, such as the Department of Ecology, which mandates a sand and gravel permit for every site. But I know that in Clark County, we have been involved in multiple layers of stormwater permitting at the county level, which then has to be justified to the Department of Ecology as well. I don't know that those other sorts of developments I mentioned have that same kind of complexity, and it'd be worth looking at some of those steps to see if they're creating, I guess, undue oversight or complication for staff as well as for the permittee in light of some of these state agencies that otherwise have that oversight. But I'll stop there, and I'll be available for questions whenever we stop our presentation.
Thank you, Eric.
Good morning, Bo Stordahl here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll try to be brief. Going into challenging permitting, I think the biggest challenge for permitting reserve is the unknown restrictions or conditions that might be placed on an operation. These conditions have shown to have an adverse impact on not only the operator, but to the industry, as you've heard, and also to Clark County itself. With the current process, there appears to be this unlimited set of and degrees of conditions that might be imposed on an applicant. Unfortunately, these are unknown until the finish line, some of which take away basic rights not even contemplated in the state's RCW, such as a legal motor vehicle's ability to access the public road system for trade on certain days. If you take into, for example, at Mountaintop, hauling is prohibited on all legal holidays, and that includes holidays such as Martin Luther King Day, Veterans Day, President's Day. There are conditions which limit the amount of trade that may be performed on an hourly basis. And I think that condition assumes, although untrue, that the applicant somehow controls the demand within the county at any given time. And I think we've heard today that a demand on a particular pit is based on the remaining resources left within the county. And that's just evident at this time. And unfortunately, there aren't any other examples of businesses within the county that are restricted by such language. It seems to be in this particular category. And I think it's for good reason too, because we don't make progress by discouraging growth or restricting the supply of aggregates relied upon by the working class in this county. I know I've spoken directly to a few of you over the last few years, and I've always been encouraged that everybody seems to appreciate the services provided by the aggregate industry. And I'm hopeful that we can find a way to examine the process itself to reflect those views. I think everybody here is advocating for the same thing, and that's a process that seems not only achievable, but worthwhile to pursue. And I think going into any process, you look at the end game and you look at how long it's going to take and monetarily what that's going to cost. And unfortunately, with the unknowns in this process, it's discouraging for somebody to pursue an aggregate resource in Clark County. And I hope we can aim to change that. I'll end by pointing out, that 4 years ago, we attended a pre-conference contemplating the simple storage of overburden on recently purchased property next to the Mountaintop Quarry 4 years ago. And due to storage being considered a mining activity, this prompted efforts to reestablish that property into the SMO, surface mining overlay, that had just been removed in 2014. That took 2 years to reestablish that area that had just been removed. And since then, we are 2 years into that, or 2 years removed from that date, and the application for the expansion has yet to be considered fully complete. So looking at those timelines, understanding how long that takes, that's something that has to be fixed if we want developers to be encouraged to even pursue a rock pit in Clark County. I'll make myself available for questions later on, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bo.
Thank you. I'm Brent Rachi, and president of Rachi Inc. We're a local excavation building general contractor and SWCA member. Rachi employs about 440 people, most of them locally here in the county. I've also had a little experience with quarries, having permitted one in Clark County once upon a time. Our company is also one of the larger consumers of aggregates in the county. Mostly, of course, we purchase them for our clients' projects, but also our own projects. Many times we're doing public bid projects for Clark County itself. Most of the points I'm going to hit on here have already been made, but a little bit different perspective here on, or an additional perspective from my standpoint. Truthfully, we contractors rather enjoy high cost materials because it means more cost to mark up. We pass it on to our customers. Expensive materials also provides more opportunity to get creative on the jobs. Like it makes recycle more viable and backhauls and so on. However, I think we all agree that we need stable markets and a stable cost of living more. As a contractor, we're very concerned about trying to keep a stable workflow for our employees and our customers. And to do this, we need reliable sources. We need consistent aggregates to show up on our job. Personal note, one of my main worries is that my kids are being attracted to other more affordable places to live. They're going to take my grandkids with them. And it's real. It's happening to some of my friends. Their kids are moving away and taking their grandkids with them. So, of course, we all know that the families, or young families especially, are the future of the county, and they're really the backbone of the construction industry. I'd like to talk a little bit about what an aggregate source is and isn't. As we all understand, a future viable aggregate resource, not just a hatched out area on a map, and then the private industry finds it and it's there. It's not quite that easy. First, this sounds stupid, but there has to be rock there. Just because there appears to be rock in the ground doesn't really necessarily mean it's commercial quality or consistent enough to be worth permitting and mining. I would venture to say that a large percentage, maybe a majority of the rocky areas that we think of as rocky areas would probably prove themselves not worth permitting if you did the proper exploration and lab work. And then you take the deposits of marginal quality, you just throw in one more negative and, you know, just one more environmental hurdle or something, and the potential of it being a viable source just evaporates. It's also important to note that not all viable sources can produce all products. The market demands certain products, and it's impossible to manufacture base course from a sand pit or quarry spalls from a gravel mine. The most fantastic quarry might not be able to produce asphalt quality rock. No one source really has the ability to create, let alone supply, every product that our market currently demands. Second, a good source needs to be close to the demand, as close in as possible, for obvious reasons. But good rock sources can't just be found anywhere. Like I stated, in fact, you know, the good competent rock is a lot harder to find than you'd think. There's a real good reason why rock pits aren't all located right next to the freeway. We have to go to the rock, and the rock doesn't come to us. A close-in source not only serves to keep the price down, but it also keeps the environmental impacts lower. In my experience in the construction world, usually the most economical solution has the least environmental impact. Most of our county's best close-in resources have been compromised pretty much beyond salvage today because of absence of planning over the decades, as you're all aware. In an ideal world, multiple sources as close to markets as possible is the best way to minimize transportation and road wear costs. And in my experience, the real root of almost all public complaints related to mining is the trucks. It's not actually the mining itself. You know, the public complains about the mining, but it's usually to try to get the trucks off the road, not to necessarily stop the mining. A couple of years ago, when a couple of the local pits were depleted and shut their doors, Roch Inc. had to purchase 4 additional trucks and trailer combinations just in order to maintain our sales volumes and keep our customers going. This was simply due to the fact that all the former trips were overnight changed into thousands of extra miles every year just to supply the same demand as the day before. I have no idea how many other contractors had to buy additional trucks, but I know they face the same issues. A third very important thing is the aggregates have to be available when demanded by the market. You know, if there's unrealistic trip quotas or permit conditions which hamstring the ability to supply the demand when it's needed, it really doesn't matter how many centuries worth of permitted resource is hiding under the ground. It's not a reliable source. Rock, for the most part, is not something you order ahead of time. Like the lady that ordered a load of concrete from a friend of mine for her husband's surprise birthday present. She had it temporarily dumped in the front lawn while her husband was at work. Normally, orders for rock are scheduled for certain hours of a specific day, and orders for asphalt and concrete are ordered for delivery at specific minutes of specific days. So reliability is a huge deal, and unreliability is a huge expense to everyone. And like it was said, you know, trip quotas are probably the most imminent part of the crisis we're staring at down the barrel today. With maximization of all the available trips among all the current sources in the county, collectively, we're just barely keeping up with the current demand. All it takes is just a modest uptick in demand this summer, and we might very well be on waiting lists to get rock delivered to your jobs. And this is a very avoidable and an easy fix as compared to some of the other challenges. And as you're all aware, you know, in the construction world, to miss a critical weather window and not get your project rocked in time can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and disrupt the public all winter, you know, if you have to wait for spring to finish your job. Now, you might think that if we were to find ourselves in a situation where we ran out of available trips, that we just have to bring in aggregates from somewhere else for a bit. But in whose car trunk? If you think about it, you know, if this scene were to happen, it'd instantly create a truck shortage. So every available truck would only be able to supply, say, only half of what it did the day before. So, you know, who loses? Fourth, maybe the biggest one even, is the permitting of any resource has to have some degree of assurance that permits can be obtained, like Bo was saying. I don't think it's a surprise if I stated that a person could comfortably retire on the interest earnings on the dollars that will be spent in entitlements for the next source permitted in Clark County, wherever it might be. I personally, I wouldn't attempt to permit the aggregate source in Clark County with any permit budget less than $2 million and say 8 years of frustration. And like Bo said, all at risk of being denied. In my experience, I firmly believe it'd be unrealistic and foolhardy to dream otherwise. So the simple math is that no one can really afford to attempt to permit a smaller resource. It just doesn't pencil. One way to look at it is if you could afford to gamble with those kinds of dollars, why not throw the $2 million into the stove and save the 8 years of frustration? It's likely to get denied or hamstrung with too many conditions. Well, obviously the sensible solution is why burn the money if you can keep it and retire. And this is exactly what's been happening the last 2 decades. To my knowledge, I don't think anyone's even attempted to permit a new source in the last few decades, where in reality someone somewhere should have been permitting something, especially given how long it takes to obtain permits. Like Eric was saying, it's we're already too late to start a new permit. If it's going to take 10 years, then we only have seven years of supply left. Another sad fallout from the high cost of permitting is that the smaller resources are going to waste that could otherwise be utilized. You know, places where the land could be repurposed in a few years without too much impact from the mining. You know, you might call them in and out opportunities that go to waste. It'd be nice to have a streamlined process to be able to efficiently capture these sources and have the short lifespans and put the land back into permanent use sooner rather than later. This would especially be handy for the smaller close-in gravel deposits. The gravel deposits are a lot easier to efficiently mine and process and aren't so disruptive to the neighborhoods. And typically the gravel deposits in Clark County are more in the lowlands and tend to be in the more populated areas. So yeah, we'd kind of like to respectfully ask that you consider ways to remove as much uncertainty from the entitlement process necessary so that the public can benefit from natural extraction costs instead of artificially driven ones. To designate more resource areas would allow better chances that one of them might test out to have a future as a real source, as it's highly unlikely that all the areas with currently that have overlays will test out successfully. A major step might be to allow outright permitted use in overlay zones. This would automatically remove a lot of the uncertainty, and it would suppose that some of the transportation issues would have been thought out ahead of time. Like I said, in my experience, transportation issues are the major hurdle. The environmental stuff is what it is. I could use help too, but transportation seems to be what riles up the neighbors. And we'd also encourage you to empower and encourage staff to help applicants overcome some of these hurdles. It kind of keeps the stranglehold on the county's aggregate resources. Another idea to consider is maybe if the county itself to private operators. Much it's like county lands that something soon.
Kevin Tapney, Vice President Tapney,
I believe it's Kevin.
and agree with lastly, Brent. Sorry. Can you hear me? Chrissy or whoever's.
Yes, we can now.
I can hear you, Kevin.
We can hear you.
Go ahead.
I do want to check
We
with
can hear you.
chair because it looks like there's a chair right here.
A little bit, but
Ron, you there, or can you hear me?
Hang on just one moment. I think
Vice
Kathleen,
President, and I can just
please,
echo a lot of the
hang on one
comments,
moment, Mr. Chair
starting
Acquiring.
last week.
This is Kathleen. So I can see people coming back now. It looked like there was some sort of blip that happened where everybody disappeared. The only one I can't see is Chair O'Brien, but I can see Kevin. So Kevin, if you want to go ahead and continue, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm not sure how far I got before the glitch came in, but I'm Kevin Tapney with Tapney Inc. We're a construction company, similar size to Rachi. I echo a lot of the comments. I think Brent did a really good job explaining some of the comments in a nice context, and back through everybody, including Bo and Eric and Ryan. I'm on the board with Ryan at NUCA. We're members of SWCA, BIAW, CREDC, and really want to just kind of support and echo everything that's been heard. Of course, growing up in the community, like many that are on here, we would love to have our children have affordable homes and have the community grow in such a way that it's if it's a planned growth and the mining and the rock, I believe there can be a win-win where everybody can win on this. My thoughts maybe kind of jump to the vision side of it, and that would be, we know that there's going to be a bridge built. It's got to happen, and we know that our traffic on our roads are continue to get more and more congested. So knowing that's coming and the amount of approved, all the big master visions on the 179th interchange area and on Kamiswashugo's growing and all these different areas of growth, Ridgefield, that those, when you permit, every house you permit on a subdivision is 550 to 600 ton of aggregate, and that's on the low side of calculating into it, like Ryan had said, per mile of road. So when you think about all this work that's coming and the vision that's coming, I think when you look at Clark County on a high level, there's only the rock comes from within the county, or it comes on 14, I-5, or the river. If you look at Clark County on a really high level, it's going to come into the county from 14, I-5, or the river. So thinking about it on the council level and the county level and the leadership of the community level, to make sure that there is overlays and is planning and all the ideas that we've heard from many folks on smaller sources close in would save environmental and all those impacts. But really, right now, for anyone to take it on, we've been involved in one quarry that has been such a situation that it's kind of like it makes you wonder if you would want to be involved in the rock starting scratch, fresh, on the amount of time, effort, and energies that go into it. So just what I would like to echo to the council and to everybody would be really working together on what really is there, what is the need, what is the demand, and how can everybody work together to get a viable community with, the housing costs being held in such a level our children and grandchildren can live around us or afford to live. And those are where my thoughts echo. I remember when Fisher Quarry was the main quarry before Mountaintop got going, and just like Brent alluded to, you had to call in ahead and tell them you're going to have 4 trucks tomorrow. And if you didn't get it, you lost out the loads. And to schedule the work, it was a complete disaster on costs and the crews and the productivities. And to be able to have known aggregate at known times is critically important. So those are my comments now, and thank you much for your consideration and time.
And Chair, in the interest of time, just a quick wrap up to say thank you very much for hearing this. And I hope you have a flavor of the mosaic of the industry, what aggregate is needed for, and the fact that we really need a new spirit of partnership and collaboration to help address this crisis that we're facing, both in terms of Round Rock and in Crushed Rock, and really across the county. And it's important that we work together on this. It cannot work if it's an antagonistic relationship. It truly has to be a partnership. And that's what we're coming here today to ask is let's roll up our shirt sleeves together and figure out short-term and long-term plans that help us have sufficient supplies of aggregate for decades to come.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you everybody for your participation in this education system. It really is helpful. I don't know if there are any quick questions of the council at this point of the presenters today. I know that we're going to go on to a county council council time, but if there are any quick questions, I would entertain those right now from the council.
I have one
Mayor,
quick question.
I have two quick questions, and I'll make them.
Okay, let's start with Gary Medvigi, Councilor Medvigi, and then we'll go to Councilor Bowerman.
So has the industry, thank you very much for that presentation, but has the industry been sitting down with staff and looking at those next future sites where we can pull good rock? Of course, in my district, I'm hopeful that it's somewhere at the end of the rail line so we can get the rock on the rail and then have local and well-positioned transfer sites to satisfy a lot of issues that have been discussed today. But the question is staff working with you to identify those next sites? Because I'm hoping, you know, if we had been in person, I would have said, point to the map, show me where that we need to look for that rock. Where can we have our next scores?
Loaded question. I wonder if Brent or Bo, you'd be interested in tackling that.
Yeah, I think that this is Bo. I think we could present something that was reviewed back in 2014. 2013, there was a Mineral Lands Task Force which showed the existing resource lands that were identified in Clark County. I think the task force did a pretty good presentation showing which areas where they likely were to occur. And for whatever reason, and I was in the room, but in 2014, those were just completely wiped off the map. I mean, even the areas surrounding the existing rock quarries were just completely annihilated. But I can get you guys that map. I can get you the map that was presented to the Planning Commission and then to the then commissioners. And I can show you the before and after map. So it'll at least show you where those were identified and recommended to commission prior to their removal. I think would be helpful.
That would be helpful. Thank you. We would gladly accept that. I think I was on the Planning Commission at the time, but we only recommend. The Planning Commission only recommended to the commissioners at the time.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, you were the one person on the Planning Commission that voted to keep any larger areas on the resource map.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's important. The GMA requires that we identify these places and therefore they should be on the map. One of my concerns is that if they, and the reason why they should be on the map is so that we do not develop housing all around them so that we run into problems with other constituents who live near the mine. Does that take care of your question, Gary?
Thank you. So I look forward to that further conversation so we can plan better in the future on our comp plan.
Councilor Bowerman.
Two quick questions. One is roughly how much now has to be brought in from other counties and transported from other counties in order to meet needs here in Clark?
I wonder if Ryan McDonald would be in position to address that.
I don't have the specific volumes, but you know, I do know that, you know, for instance, the Fisher quarry that's now mined out, all that material you see there is trucked in from Skamania County or brought in from Knife River, barged in from across the river. You know, there are a lot of sources that are being barged down, you know, from the Dalles area and into the market. But as far as the volumes, I couldn't tell you on what exactly that is.
Yeah, I was thinking volume, percentage, anything that kind of gives us an idea. I've heard this complaint from builders, and that of course adds to cost, but I don't have a sense for how great of a problem it is. And I was hoping maybe some of your professional organizations might have an idea.
I could maybe talk to that just a moment here, Bowerman, is I know Stordahl doing a lot of pre-planning and maximizing loads out of Mountaintop to Daybreak is really helping control some of those spikes in those off times. I know they're doing a lot of pre-planning. There is some material coming down I-5 in the river and Highway 14, but I wouldn't know the percentage at this point. But I do know that Stordahl is doing a lot of planning for the trips on the Daybreak route.
Thank you. A second question is just something that when the time is right and in the right venue, I feel the need for us to explore at length. I don't understand how you can exist with an unlimited set of conditions that just kind of roll along and are imposed until the finish line. That just doesn't seem tenable for being able to cope with our permitting process. And I guess what I'm wanting to know is, are there counties that have a definable list, however long and difficult that list may be, but that have a definable list of here are the conditions to be met? There are. Where are they?
Eric Staley here. I can speak to that to some degree because I do permitting in a lot of counties. There's not really a list that you could say cut from one part of the code and put onto a permit and that would be the case. But kind of what I was touching on is that some of the conditions that might be on that list from Clark County wouldn't be on other counties because those other counties would defer to, for example, the DNR for reclamation or for operations, or to the Department of Ecology for the stormwater management that those state agencies otherwise are involved in. So basically the unnecessary load of conditions can be relieved by just acknowledging that those state agencies are responsible for those aspects.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just had what I think is a really quick question, and that is, once you think that there is surface, the availability of this resource, and you identify it, I mean, I do have some questions for our staff, which I will ask later, and that is, you know, are most of ours from property owners that come and say, will you please identify this as rock? But once something is identified or brought forward, how costly is it to, and who finds out if there is good rock wherever it is identified? And I'm not sure, Eric, would you answer that, or I don't know who to call.
Well, I can start the answer. I believe the basis for the mapping Bo was referring to ultimately came from some knowledge of the county, but also a DNR study that was completed in 2005. They made a potential aggregate resource map. And I know one of the gentlemen that did that mapping, it was based primarily on the mapped geology. If it was a potentially good resource that had mines in it already, then it got high potential. If it was a similar rock type that maybe isn't developed yet, but has that potential, then it might be a medium grade. But those kinds of desktop research and maybe field confirmations are what are required just to get things started. And thereafter, it often takes outcrop sampling, lab testing, a drill program, all kinds of things. And it's on the potential permittee, the potential operator. to figure those out and put forth those costs.
Okay, and are those fairly costly things to complete?
Most definitely. You know, I know I'm the guy usually doing the work, so you know I know how that goes. But you know, especially when you get into a drilling program, you know, you're at the cost of somewheres to $50 to $100 per drilled foot. So if you want to explore a site that's hundreds of acres, you can imagine how that starts to get expensive.
I see. Thank you. That helps. Any other questions of the council quickly before we let these nice people go? I hear or see none. Again, thank you so much for participating today. It was very helpful, and I think will be helpful for us as a council to move forward. So we may call upon you individually for answers to questions in the future here, but I do thank Identity Clark County for originally bringing this up and you know, having this session. Thank you for putting it all together, and we look forward to working hand in hand to create really a good atmosphere for our growth and our growth management, and working with all of our constituents. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. We view this as the starting point, not the finish line. So we very much appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Okay, I will adjourn this meeting, and councilors, we are going to go into council time, but I'm going to allow a 5-minute break. If hopefully that's enough, but let's take a 5-minute break. I will see you. We will stay on this particular WebEx. So I'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.